This is the GamesIndustry.biz Microcast recorded on Friday the 19th of July 2024. I'm James Batchelor, Editor-in-Chief of GamesIndustry.biz, and I'm not joined by Chris String this week because he's busy. So I'm joined by MobileGamer.biz Editor-in-Chief Neil Long. Neil, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, no trouble at all. I will try and play the Chris String role in this podcast as best I can.
I've been trying to play the Chris String role for years. It's just really difficult. So, we've got you on because we've got a particular story that your site broke, and we'll be diving into that a little bit later. But first of all, I kind of wanted to continue the discussion we had last week on the Microcast about Xbox Game Pass and the changes they've made. If you missed this, like the very, very short cliff notes, Chris and I took 3 or 4 attempts at explaining it, but the very short version is price increases for all the other tiers. They're not taking any more new subscribers to console Game Pass, so that one is basically being phased out. And there's a new standard tier with no day one releases. Now, the continuing part of the story is the Federal Trade Commission in the US has criticised Xbox and actually filed a letter with the US Court of Appeals. The FTC is still trying to fight against the Microsoft Activision Blizzard merger. Obviously, as we all know, they went to court against Microsoft last year. They failed. They are still trying to appeal that decision, even though the deal has gone through and the companies are now now complete, now merged. But in the latest letter fired to the US Court of Appeals, they criticised Microsoft, saying that its actions are inconsistent with what the firm previously said about Game Pass price increases. And they said that these changes are exactly the sort of consumer harm from the merger that the FTC has alleged. Specifically, they are looking at the discontinuation or the phasing out of the Xbox Game Pass for consoles, pointing out that users of that product will end up having to pay 81% more to switch to Game Pass Ultimate. And they can go to Standard, which is similar to what Game Pass console was, but it doesn't include the games released and launched. It costs 36% more, and they're getting less than they already had. So they've spoken out against this. So this I'm intrigued to see what the reactions are going to be. Neil, your thoughts on the changes that Microsoft made to Game Pass? This has been quite the topic.
Yeah, it's I think it's more. I don't think the FTC have. I mean, they're not a monopoly, right? It's. I think the move is probably more to do with them needing to make some money out of Game Pass rather than having claimed such a vast audience that they can just put up their prices and they have no competition. There's plenty of subscription games services out there, so it's a kind of a weird. I don't know what is going on with America in general, but the FTC seems to do some fairly misguided stuff. I would imagine that this is some seniors at Microsoft telling the Xbox division that they need to make some money, and the best way to do that is raise prices and get more money from your most loyal customers, who the sort of the psychology of a subscription is that once you have it, you kind of don't want to lose it, and you'll be happy to pay a little bit more to keep that game catalog. But as a consumer, I'm not an Xbox owner. The games on Game Pass don't really appeal to me. They're all very hardcore games. I have a PlayStation. I'm happy with that. I don't really see where Game Pass goes from this point. Without being too damning about Xbox's strategy, I mean, they need numbers in Games Pass to make it a viable business, and raising the prices and sort of raising the drawbridge on the entry point seems like a weird way to go about getting more numbers and more customers.
As we said last week, I think they are gearing up for the fact that they finally have a much more solid release slate of titles coming up. So like there's more value coming to the service. There's much more things that we could charge more for. You couldn't have done this like a year ago, but equally, like they're trying to grow the audience. They're putting it on different platforms like Amazon Fire Stick and Samsung TVs, and as Chris pointed out last week, they're keeping the price low on PC because that is a potential growth market for them. But it's just interesting to see the conversation continue and the FTC's continuing efforts to fight against a deal that is already finished. That's not the main topic we're talking about this week. The main thing we want to talk about this week is actually some stories that came from your site, mobilegamer.biz. So this is a look at the AAA games that have come to iOS in the last year. So Apple announced last year with the iPhone 15 Pro would be able to natively run games like Death Stranding, Assassin's Creed Mirage, Resident Evil 4 Remake, Resident Evil Village. More recently, we've had Resident Evil 7. You've reported that Resident Evil 7, according to data from AppMagic, has had 83,000 downloads since it launched on July the 2nd. But only earned $28,140, which by your estimates means that only 2,000 people are getting to the end of the demo section and paying to unlock the full game. I guess thoughts in general first, like rather than a specific example, like just the prospect of AAA games on mobile, like it's one of those things that struck me last year. Is like it's amazing that you can do that now. That you can technically run a AAA game on a mobile device, but who's going to do that? Who's the market?
Well, I think as these stories have proven, there isn't a market for these games. I think they're great tech demos. Apple's phones are incredibly powerful, I think some tech websites have benchmarked these. I'm not a techie guy, but like some graphics experts have placed the power of some iPhones as like greater than even a baseline PS4. So these are incredibly capable devices, but there's a complete sort of disconnect here between what people actually want to play on mobile and what Apple keeps showcasing in its keynotes, and understandably, as I've speculated in those stories, these are they're present in an Apple keynote, which suggests that 6 months to a year beforehand, someone at Apple has approached those developers and said, "We want to showcase your game in this keynote. Perhaps we'll cover the costs of development to get this game out on the market." But then what happens is these Apple keynotes happen. It's very impressive that Assassin's Creed Mirage is running on an iPhone. The press sort of latches onto it and says, "Oh wow, AAA games are playable on iPhone," and then the story the news cycle moves on and on. But when you talk to people in the mobile business, they see those games and think, why would anyone want to play these on a mobile device, especially if it's a 6-month-old game, which is better played on a controller on a big screen in your living room. I think this sort of story, which is again unconfirmed, I don't know this for sure, but it seems very likely that Apple is paying developers to make these games and then releasing them, sort of promoting them on the App Store as they would, but really no one really wants to play these games, and definitely don't want to pay $50 to play a game on a format that is just not suited to that type of game. I'm glad I'm glad those stories that I've been publishing have sort of resonated and picked up a lot of traffic, because it helps my business, it helps my website. But really, I think if you ask anyone in the mobile business, it was kind of like we kind of knew that already. These stories really just confirm what you already suspected.
Yeah, it was always an odd proposition. Like as you say, like most of these games are built, they are designed from the ground up, built with in mind, like big TVs, big TVs, console, sitting on a controller, or high-end PC, really high-end PC, someone like on a dedicated game device. So cramming them into a smartphone, while technologically impressive, the proposition doesn't make sense. Like there was enough skepticism around PlayStation Portal, for example, which we a controller with a screen, like, and playing these games, streaming them to this small device, whereas they're built to be played. I mean, the UI in most of these games is tiny. Funnily enough, I've actually been playing Assassin's Creed Mirage recently, and like the menus and everything it's tiny. So cramming it onto a smartphone screen, like, and I think there's also the assumption. The assumption is that when you're putting a game like this with more complex controls onto a smartphone, which has no input other than the touchscreen, the assumption is that it's going to rely heavily on the virtual controls, the interface, like kind of over the top of the graphics, and like we've seen screenshots and so forth, and you've got buttons.
Yeah, they are terrible. I think you've used some of those screenshots in your opinion piece that you've ran on your site today, where and I've used them in my reporting as well, where the virtual controls are like almost 90% of the screen, and there's a small dot of like where the actual game is in the middle. Obviously, no one is actually playing with these virtual controls. That if you download the games, it says very clearly, this is meant to be played with a Bluetooth controller. The other part of this story that people have maybe less picked up on, you probably get this too on your site, but no one really read to the end on that story. At the end of the story, it says, depending on your broadband speed, this game is going to take 8 to 10 minutes to download. In some cases, hours. And then right at the bottom of the details on the product screen, this is for Resident Evil 7. It says, "We are not offering refunds under any circumstances," which seems. I'm not sure if that's even allowed.
I wonder if consumer rights groups will pick up on this like soon and actually start doing something about that, because that's ridiculous. Like you said, a 25 gigabyte file size for Resident Evil 7. Like,
it's going to take, even if you download like a Genshin Impact or Zenith Zone Zero, which is kind of a subplot that I can to this story really. Like those games are very big games, open world sort of action RPG type games, kind of like Assassin's Creed. But they are free to play sort of native games, and they do incredibly well. The controls are simplified. The sort of the rhythm of the gameplay is much tighter. The monetization efforts are sort of more well defined, and as a result, they're incredibly successful games. Those games, are big games and take a lot to download, but they seem to be much more successful. I think that this sort of the middle ground, which is coming here, is Assassin's Creed. I think it's called Jade. So it's a Ubisoft made for mobile Ubisoft game made by Tencent, which is an open world sort of gacha RPG, kind of like Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail. So you've got the sort of China style monetization, you might say, gacha RPG, mixed with that Western style gameplay made by a Chinese developer who really understands this stuff. I think that might be the way to do AAA on mobile if you really want to do that. It'll be really interesting to see what happens when that game comes out later this year.
Definitely, particularly interesting because, like, obviously, Ubisoft. I believe Ubisoft have said that Assassin's Creed Shadows is coming to iOS as well. Like, they're still continuing. Like, these iOS ports. So it's like they're almost going to be competing with themselves, I guess. Like, but I would assume / hope that Jade does better than Shadows, because Jade will be, as you said, like built specifically for mobile. Like, this is the trouble. You're taking games that are not built for mobile. Like, mobile is an incredibly different format. There's so much crossover between console and PC. There is crossover between mobile and console. It works the other way. You can take mobile games and adapt them to console and PC, and simpler games you can take from console to mobile and PC to mobile.
Mm.
But when you're talking about like the high-end AAA blockbusters, like those games are so complex in terms of, mechanics, design, scope, scale, size. I mean, to go back to the file size briefly, like there's already enough competition for hard drive space on consoles. When you've got like Fortnite and Call of Duty and stuff like taking up hundreds of megs, maybe not Fortnite taking up, but like Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto taking up hundreds of megs. So there's a limit to how many games you can have readily available on your console. When granted 25 gigs is like a quarter the size of that, but when you're competing on a device that is also storing all your movies and TV shows and music and family photos and audio and apps and all these other. I mean, my phone's constantly nearly full.
Yeah.
Particularly like iOS, whenever they pre-download their next system update, and that always takes up like
Yeah, you have to remove a
multiple
load.
gigs.
You have to remove a
Yeah,
load of stuff to get anything on there. That's actually a yet another problem with Resident Evil. You need double the actual. So if the game, I think the game is like 25 gig, but you need 25 gig spare as well. So you
right.
know, and it's only playable on iPhone 15 and iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max. I can't remember what they're all called now. But yeah, it really is just an example of um, how not to do uh, console games on mobile, and also
Mm,
maybe an indication of Apple's tendency to present one thing as the next, the second coming, and then 6 months later, kind of the reality of it is that no one really wants this thing and it doesn't really work.
yeah.
Which has happened before. I mean, they announced No Man's Sky for iPad a couple of years ago, which um, hasn't materialized. So and I understand. Apple's a big tech company. It's a very complex company. Things get cancelled quietly. Things happen a lot of the time that no one notices. But yeah, it's an interesting story. I'm sure it'll be the same with Assassin's Creed Shadows. That will be a
Mm,
fantastic tech demo, and it will be very impressive to see it running on the new iPhones. But it's just not the right form or function for that kind of game. I struggle enough with um, the complexity of console games.
yeah.
Upgrade trees, things like that. I just want action. I just want to,
Yeah.
play a game. And when you're 2 hours into a game and then the credits roll, it's like, okay, this is, the average interaction time on a mobile game is like 3 minutes. So, you know,
That's the other thing. Like these games are built around long sessions in mind. They're built with
yeah,
the assumption you're going to be playing for half an hour, likely hours, plural, at a
yeah.
time. Because like
Before
even
before
just
you
like
even see the title screen, sometimes.
yeah,
So I mean, by that time your phone would have melted from playing
yes, yeah,
Assassin's Creed Mirage on your phone. So I mean, it's just a fundamental failure of those games on those devices, and it will be interesting to see. I mean, those stories that I've been running have got quite a big reaction. So I wonder if Apple will plow on with doing this and bringing
yeah.
paying developers to bring these high end games to iPhones, considering that now it's quite clear that no one is actually buying them.
I would be shocked. I think maybe this year's keynote you might see another big game if they can get it. If they get like something popular like Cyberpunk or something stupid like that, which
Yeah,
also not a game that should be played on a phone. But I think you'll maybe get one more year of hey, we've got this big signing, and then I think they will just quietly stop funding it.
I
I
think I
highly
think
doubt
yeah.
developers and publishers will start funding this or targeting this of their own accord.
Yeah, I think what they get right is they always have Hoyoverse, MiHoYo, however you
Yeah,
want it, whatever you want to call it. They have Zenless Zone Zero in their keynotes. I think that is a fantastic tech demo, uh, but also it's an incredibly popular game that works natively on the phone. I think that is the route they should go down when they are going down these sort of tech hardware showcase type presentations, rather than persevering with these like I don't know, is it a good look to say this 2 year old console game is now on iPhone? Like
yeah,
it should be the cutting edge, and those games are not the cutting edge. Like Death Stranding is what, 6 years old, 7 years old.
Yeah.
Like what's the point?
So
Yeah.
GTA 6 confirmed for iPhone 16 Pro. That's what you're saying.
I mean, look,
Go on.
Apple have got a lot of money. They might just go fully mad and pay Rockstar a bunch of money to. No, they definitely won't do that. It would be very off brand, put it that way, to have Grand Theft Auto in an Apple keynote. I think Nintendo is much more their bedfellow, I would say.
Yeah. One last kind of topic around this I want to discuss. We've kind of started alluding to it there, like we're talking about whether or not Apple will continue this. But I'm intrigued about your thoughts on like the future of AAA games on mobile, AAA or console style games on mobile. I ask that because, like, at the moment these are only available on like 2 high-end mobile phones. But with the improvements of tech, it will get to the point where 5-10 years from now, these sort of games will just run on any phone that is produced, going forward. We've shown that there's not a market for it at the moment, but that's a very kind of limited install base because it's only on the two most most recent devices. As and when like Android devices catch up, like as and when Apple, it's more available. Do you see this picking up at any point, or do you think the fundamental flaw of trying to get a AAA console style experience across on a mobile device, do you think it's just doomed to fail?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, you have big console brands on mobile that work very successfully. Call of Duty Mobile is a huge success. But that, again, is built for mobile as a free-to-play game by a Chinese developer who absolutely understands mobile and how to monetize in mobile. Diablo Immortal is a big console PC franchise, really, which is less successful than Call of Duty Mobile, I think. But broadly speaking, very successful game, very high-end production values, but it is made in the first place as a free-to-play mobile game. The mistake is just taking those play patterns that we talked about in console and PC, hours of gameplay, complex controls, hour-long missions, and no one really wants to do that on mobile phones. They want a couple of minutes of instant fun action, and then they want to like put their phone away and look at TikTok or do something else. So yeah, I don't really, and also there's no need to make it happen. As an observer of the reporting around this, when maybe it's a slight bugbear of mine because I run a mobile games industry website, but when these Apple keynotes happen, some of the reporting around it is like, oh, finally, real games are coming to mobile, to mobile, and it's like, your definition of what a real game is very limited. You mean hardcore games, whereas mobile's sort of appeal is that mobile games are mostly games for people who don't have a PlayStation, who don't have an Xbox, who don't have a Switch. It's for everyone else, which is actually a much larger market. So this sort of optics of it is really confusing because like there is no benefit to bringing console or PC AAA games to mobile because they don't work on the device. No one wants to do that on that device, and there are hundreds of millions of games out there already which are designed for that device that do a better job. So like it's almost like stop trying to make this thing happen. And if you want to see really high production values on a mobile phone, look at the Hoyoverse games, look at Zenless Zone Zero, look at Genshin Impact. Like those games, if that's what you want, they're out there already and they're made for mobile phones. So yeah, just like stop trying to make this thing happen. It's really weird. It doesn't make any business sense. So
it really doesn't.
Yeah.
Neil, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your insight into this.
Oh, no problem. I'm not sure if I performed the Chris String role effectively or not. I guess your your listeners and viewers will decide.
You spoke more than me. That's the Chris String role, so that's absolutely fine. Where can people find more of your work?
Mobilegamer.biz. Yeah, just Google that. It's the mobile games industry website, which specializes in original content. So most of the stuff you see on there is purely original and written by me and contributor Alex.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That is all we've got time for. I'm going to try and keep this short just to prove to Chris that I can. I say that I've probably gone over than over like we usually do, but not 40 minutes like last week, sorry, hopefully. You can find all previous episodes of the Microcast on the YouTube channel or on the podcasting platform of your choice. Just search for the GamesIndustry.biz podcast. You can find more news, insight, and analysis into the world behind video games at GamesIndustry.biz. We're going to be back next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.